Okay. Hi witchlings, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm on a warpath because I sat down and I said, what book should I read next for my retelling series on YouTube? And you guys said, you know, The Song of Achilles. This book emotionally destroyed me. This book took my heart out of my chest and served it back to me on a platter. I don't know how I lived before reading this book. It was profound, it was life-changing, and I don't know why I am so upset about two fictional men. Like hardcore fictional. But I am. And this is where we are now. So today I am reviewing The Song of Achilles. A few things before we begin. Reviews are for readers, not for authors. This is one person's opinion on reviewing this book. It is not gonna be everyone's opinion, so if you disagree, that's fine. We can have conversations about myths and interpretations and the original source material all day, but the bottom line is everyone's gonna have a different opinion, because that is, to an extent, the purpose of myths, is to teach us about ourselves and allow us space to understand ourselves and view ourselves and learning about the gods and these heroes. So, we're gonna break down this book. We're going background, what I liked. We're gonna talk a little bit about queering mythology. And what I mean by that is I can tell, I posted a reel about this, and within it, there was like debate about whether I should be calling this book a queer retelling. The only reason I did so is because they fuck. It's very, very, very gay. And the original myth is queer as well, but there's like debate about that. I don't know. So we're gonna talk about it. I'm gonna make room in the comment section for people to discuss the original queerness of the myth, and also different, I will touch points on different opinions of different historians for what the relationship of Achilles and Patroclus was. I will pull also from a class I recently took called Queer Devotion and talk about that a little bit after we talk about queering mythology and also just queer stories and history, because this one's pretty gay. Background, this book takes from the Iliad and specifically the myth of Achilles and Patroclus. If you're unfamiliar with the myth of Achilles and Patroclus, it is about the great warrior Achilles and Patroclus, his companion, who he likes a lot more than anyone else. Side-eye. Not like a bombastic side-eye, but like a side-eye. You know what I mean? I have not read the Iliad in a hot minute. So, I'm also not going to sit here and debate with a bunch of different people what the meaning of the myths are, what the purpose of them are. Because, in my opinion, the purpose of mythology is not only to help us understand the gods and ourselves in the face of the gods and divinity, but it is to really see ourselves reflected in these stories and see ourselves reflected in the gods, which is why I think it's amazing that even after all these years, we can still read these stories or retellings of these stories and see bits of ourselves in the stories and come to our own conclusions about what it means and what people were trying to say. None of the people who wrote the ancient Greek myths are still alive. We can read it all we want, we can read their discussions on it, we can study all of their plays and interpretations and notes, but do we 100% know anything they were thinking? No. There are more accepted things in historian world and historically or theologically or even mythologically, this is accepted versus this is not. This isn't a chance for you to change the myths and just go completely against our understanding of it. It is, however, a chance for you to look within the subtext in between the lines and come to your own conclusions. Was Diana asexual? Was Artemis asexual? Was Artemis a lesbian? I don't know. If you feel like she was, fantastic for you. Furthermore, background takes place of Achilles and Patroclus. This book is a masterful retelling. It is not similar to the last book where like, it's like, I'm gonna take the names of the gods and put it on people and write a story and it's gonna be a retelling. No, like this is an actual retelling. It's pulling from the source material. Madeline Miller actually, you can tell she actually researched this. She actually read the Iliad and from that came to her own conclusions and created things around the myth to fill in the blanks. That to me is what makes a great retelling. That taking of the original myth and finding something in it that maybe someone hasn't seen before, or maybe a lot of people have seen, but they've never said it out loud, or they've never really written a book about it. Madeline Miller did that. Madeline Miller sat down and said, you know what, this is pretty gay. I'm gonna write it and I'm gonna make it gay. Fuck yeah, we love it here. This book is romantic, it is captivating, it is tragic, it is heartbreaking, and at the very last second, you will burst into tears. And I think the best books are the ones that you wish you could read again for the first time. And this book did that for me. All right, we're gonna start by breaking down the players in this. There is Achilles, the great warrior, who is actually not the narrator of this story. It is Patroclus, his companion. Often sometimes referred to as Achilles' most beloved, but there is like a male companion, and Madeline Miller talks about this as well. So she talks about the specific term used for male companions in ancient Greece, specifically for like warriors, princes. She also talks through like the idea around a particular type of relationship, which was an older man and a younger man. But anyways, Achilles the great warrior, Patroclus his male companion and lover. We have a lot of other players. Odysseus is there, the dude from the Odyssey. What's up? I fucking can never pronounce this guy's name. Agamemnon is the king leading the Greek armies in the Trojan War. And the background of the Trojan War was that Helen, who is like referred to as the most beautiful woman in the world, is stolen from her husband in Greece and taken to Troy. I don't know if Aphrodite did that or Paris did it. I feel like Aphrodite did it. Once again, there are sections in this book where like the original myth is alluded to, but since we're hearing it from like the position of mortals, there's not the sense of all-knowing that we get with the myth. So something may be happening in this book, but if you read the original myth, you know that something else was actually happening. It's just the mortals thought that's what was occurring, which is so cool. It's so cool, I love it. Anyways, Agamemnon, of course we have Chiron. I say Chiron, I'm pretty sure I'm pronouncing it wrong. The centaur who trains Achilles and Patroclus, and we get a lovely time of them being on the mountain, being in love, training. Some of my favorite quotes are when they're training with Chiron. And then there's war. War is happening. So they are sent back down to his father. And Thetis, Achilles' mother, which constantly wants to kind of make him a hero, steals him away to somewhere else and tries to hide him as a woman so he doesn't have to go to war. And of course Patroclus is like, I'm losing my fucking marbles, where is my man? And hunts him down. And there's also like a bit of things like a marriage occurs, Thetis says the marriage, and then there's what's the fucking word? Contraception. No, that was not used. Consecration of the marriage. Okay, Achilles and this random lady who Thetis married him to on this island had sex, and the deal was kind of like she will have a daughter named after Achilles. And that's the kind of prize for keeping him hidden. And of course Odysseus and these guys find him, and then they go to war. And I would say a decent chunk of this book is the Trojan War. Like that much? Because the Trojan War was like 11 years. Literally some dude in ancient Greece sat down said, I'm gonna create a fictional story with a fictional war and make it absolutely heartbreaking. And he just did that. Homer did that. It's giving. It's giving. Fucking Homer. So this focuses on the story of Achilles and Patroclus from the lens of Patroclus, which gives us a completely new perspective. I love it because you see all of the things that Achilles does from an outside perspective, and it's so wild. Achilles is the son of Thetis, and like his father, I guess, who trapped Thetis and assaulted her, which I like that was not taken out of context. There wasn't a major love story. So the background of this is the Iliad and that story specifically. There's so many things I like in this book. One of which is that it very much understands the culture of ancient Greece and the cultural context this myth resided in, and writes that into the book, such as Thetis was assaulted, and the gods literally gave Thetis to a mortal man as a gift and did not ask her, which we can also see in what I talked about with like neon gods, where Demeter and Persephone were not asked. Persephone was not asked if she could be wed to Hades. It was Zeus giving Hades permission to marry Persephone, and Hades just took Persephone. The kind of idea that women's opinions are not valued or really put a lot of weight on in ancient Greece is also owed to multiple times in which Patroclus says, like, literally just says women's opinions like she's a woman, and they're not given much thought. There's also a ode to kind of some historians' takes on the relationship of Achilles and Patroclus, talking about a very specific relationship in which there is an older man and a younger boy. So it's not necessarily a balanced relationship, and they talk about how that's something that usually happens when the boy is a child, and then once the child grows up, it's no longer a thing. We can connect the dots there. I love the way, and I read Circe before I read Song of Achilles. I actually liked Circe a little less than this book, which I find really interesting. A lot of people tell me it's better. I liked this book more. But within both Circe and Song of Achilles, Madeline Miller perfectly portrays the way that I feel the gods are portrayed in this mythology and in Greek mythology as a whole, which is the fact that they are not human and they are untouchable, but they are also incredibly present. They are there in every single moment, in decisions, in affecting everything. But they are out of touch. And Thetis, who we see a lot of because she visits Achilles, and Patroclus is like, Thetis, your mom doesn't like me. And Thetis is like, fuck you. You're not good enough for him. Thetis is like a sea nymph. She's one of the lesser goddesses, but the kind of more major goddesses, we only really see one of them at the end of the book, which is it's absolutely wild because they're literally playing a part in every single aspect of this story. They set up the Trojan War. They meddled in human affairs because they were bored and they wanted the Trojan War to happen. We have Aphrodite, who is a main player. We have Athena, who is a main player. We have all of these things in here, and yet we never see them. The way that we interact and the way Madeline Miller shows that the gods are like angry or happy or upset is through nature, through occurrences that are strange, such as they are trying to sail to Troy, but the wind dies. There's no wind for like months, and they finally realize that Artemis is unhappy. It's so, I feel like it reflects my understanding of my gods so wildly accurately, because they are these, not necessarily omnipresent, but they are, well, that is a big bird. They are sitting there and affecting all of these things in our lives working their magic, working their will into everything we do, but yet we cannot touch them. Even with Thetis, there is a level of like, Patroclus knows she is not human, and she does not behave in the way that humans do. She does not look human. There's always an otherworldly presence to her when she is described. And it makes Patroclus uncomfortable. But it's so chef's kiss. It is the only, Circe and Song of Achilles have been the only two books where I read it and I'm like, wow, yeah, this is how I feel that like the gods are. There are so many quotes. I have little things that I like really enjoyed, but I love the odes to the cultural context of Greece, one. I love the odes to and the way the gods are presented, and I love the way in which they are, just the poetic language of this book, chef's kiss. There are more things I like, but we are going to get a little bit more into like deviations from the original myth before we get there. One of which is that in the original myth, Achilles is dunked in the river Styx and held by his heel by his mother to make him invulnerable. And when he is killed, it is Apollo guiding Paris's arrow to the heel of Achilles to kill him. In the book, that is never mentioned. There is never a point in which he is dunked in the river Styx. He's not made invulnerable. When he is killed by arrow via Paris and like via Apollo, but he's shot through the back. So the idea of like he was never defeated in battle is still there. But that is like the Achilles heel is completely taken out of this story. I feel like Athena played a role in the Iliad with Achilles a little more, and we don't get any of that, but I'm gonna double check that. Athena is working as a mentor in the Trojan War to Achilles, battling on the side of the Achaeans. Athena is reigning in his impulsivity and direct his strength and ability to get impulsivity. However, we never see Athena. She is not mentioned in terms of like the only time she's mentioned in Odysseus is like the gray-eyed goddess favors me. You do well and not with me. And they're like, right, oops. But because we never see these gods, we know from the original myth where all of these gods are working and they're pulling their strings. We don't necessarily need to see Athena interact with Achilles. We can, by reading the story and see how Achilles operates in battle, how he never is touched. He's completely invulnerable, and everyone is terrified of him because anyone who comes close to him is cut down. We can see that, and we can also wonder if Athena is playing a role in that. In the same way that the rest of the book functions as all of these things are triggered by gods. They're upset, they're pulling the strings, they're pulling favors. But we never really see Athena and Achilles like sit down. And I think that further plays into the idea that these gods are ever present, but not touchable. I also feel like Patroclus, I feel like there was while fighting, Patroclus's wits were removed by Apollo. We also note that in the book. There's a section where Patroclus is literally running around and being like, I don't know what's coming over me. I'm just bloodthirsty. I want to shoot people. I want to do these things. And it's Apollo. But we don't necessarily see the way in which it's just so masterful. The biggest deviation is the removal of the Achilles heel. That is not mentioned at all, and that is such a big thing. But I think that there is a lot of stuff that is relatively similar, such as the companionship between Patroclus and Achilles being noted as they are cold to everyone else, but they are warm to each other. Now we're getting into the queering of mythology. Like I said, even within the reel I posted, there was a debate happening on whether this is a queer retelling or the original myth is queer. My opinion is the original myth is queer and alludes to queerness, but our understanding of relationships in our modern day is going to be different than the understanding of relationships back then. And even in the book, it's talked about of like, it's frowned upon to have these two men to be together in an equal partnership like a man and a woman. I also think that Achilles gets married in the original myth, and that doesn't happen here. Like Patroclus and Achilles and their relationship as lovers is centered throughout the entirety of this book. There was, I believe, some debate between, like I said, if it was an older man, younger, like pedophilia relationship, or a relationship when they were just really close friends. My opinion is they were queer, but the question is that queerness different in the cultural context of ancient Greece than it is now? Or were they queer in the way we understand it today, in the way Song of Achilles talks about? Once again, I think that queer stories and queer mythology exist in the subtext. I think that they probably, I mean, Homer knew what he was doing. These boys be gay. And I think we can debate historian-wise, and we can really go through and look at these myths and have really academic conversations about this, but at the end of the day, if we really just kind of look at the story and look at the subtext, I feel as though it is queer. And that doesn't exclude the debates around what kind of queer, but this book in particular erases that debate of they were not lovers, they were friends, this was this kind of relationship, and just says they're gay. They love each other. They are the most beloved. And that is why I love it. Because it just takes this like highly alluded to queer mythos of history and says, no, they're queer. I love it. In the same way that like, no one is going around saying, there's no mythos to say that Artemis was a lesbian. It isn't overtly said that Artemis is not interested in men or Artemis is not interested in sex. But people come to that own conclusion by looking at the subtext and in between the lines. And that to me is the purpose of mythology. It is to look at these stories that were written so long ago and we continue to find pieces of ourselves in them. We don't know what Homer intended. We don't know if Homer wrote this story intending for them to be a particular type of relationship or if they were just really, really good friends. But everyone's going to read this and come to a different conclusion, find a different response, or understand it in a different way because that subtext and that room for interpretation exists in this myth. And there are many myths that there is that room for interpretation, there's room for us to sit here and say, wow, I really see a lot of myself in this identity, in this god, in this myth. Does it mean that the myth itself is going to be A, B, or C? Nah, we don't know. We don't know. It's the best part of mythology is we cannot sit here and say with 100% certainty that Homer intended it this way. We can debate, once again, we can look at what is the more appropriate ideas, the more academically accepted ideas, but we can't know for sure. I love mythology. So, if you read the Iliad and you're like, Achilles and Patroclus were definitely gay and queer, cool. If you're like, I don't know, it seems more like an elder and a younger one, cool. There's room for us to discuss that. There's room for all of us to kind of sit down and read through it and pull, and then, this isn't to say that you can take the myth and subvert it completely into something new that is not alluded to, such as Persephone going of her own will to Hades, when that is never mentioned in the myths. Hades always abducts Persephone. What we can look at in the subtext of that myth is what is the purpose? How does Persephone change after this? What does she become? What was Demeter, how does the relationship of mother and daughter really come into play. Furthermore, this isn't to say that we should completely ignore historians or academics who have spent all of their life researching this and their conclusions. I talked about this in my video about folk magic. We can listen to opinions we don't agree with. We can read different academic responses and ideas and theses and historians' opinions on what this myth really was and the relationship of them without saying, you know what, I agree, or you know what, I disagree. We can take it into our brains to help us understand cultural context and understand the myths more and understand how different people are going to come to different conclusions. And that's okay. We can do that. Multiple things can be true at once. Welcome to my review of the Song of Achilles. Oh yeah, quotes that made me crumble into non-existence. These were the good ones. Oh, the foreshadowing in this book is absolutely insane. There is no law that gods must be fair, Achilles, Chiron said, and perhaps it is the greater grief, after all, to be left on earth when another is gone. Do you think? Later, we know from the prophecy that Thetis tells Achilles, you will die during this war, that Patroclus says, I will not live after him. Which is also wild because Patroclus died first and Achilles was then like, I want to die. The greater grief to be left on earth when another is gone, and they both have decided that is not happening for either of them. The never-ending ache of love and sorrow. Perhaps in some other life I could have refused, could have torn my hair and screamed and made him face his choice alone, but not in this one. He would sail to Troy and I would follow, even in death. I want to die. That talking about the murder of Iphigenia, the sacrifice of Iphigenia, which is one of the most brutal aspects of this book, is that a human sacrifice, it is said, is like frowned upon. Animal sacrifice is not. But Iphigenia is sacrificed to appease Artemis, which I don't know what the lesson is there. They needed a virgin priestess, which is terrible. The beginning, on page 296, the beginning of hope. We have given each other wounds, but they are not mortal. Briseis will not be harmed, and Achilles will remember himself, and my wrist will heal. There will be a moment after this, and another after that. Ah! What? You're telling me Madeline Miller sat down and wrote this shit and was like, that's good, and I'm crying. There are tears in my eyes. Okay, and then we get to sort of the end. There's another part where he says something, where it's just so romantic. There's so much romance. I feel like I could eat the world raw. Love will do that to you. When I am dead, I charge you to mingle our ashes and bury us together. That is also something that happened, and this is after Patroclus is murdered, and Patroclus is not buried yet, so he is still lingering in the above world. He's literally telling someone, you put us together, you bury us together. The entire end is Achilles' son is refusing to write Patroclus' name next to Achilles, and therefore is keeping him as a ghost on earth, is refusing him to rest properly. And at the very end, after Thetis and Patroclus talk and share and talking about all these things, and Thetis is talking about it, says, I could not make him a god. Her jagged voice rich with grief. And another big theme that we can see present in this is Thetis is completely unable to change the fate of her son. No matter how much she tries, he is doomed. She does not answer me for a long time, only sits, eyes shining with the last of the dying light. I have done it, she says. At first I do not understand, but then I see the tomb and the mark she has made on the stone. Achilles, it reads, and beside it, Patroclus. Go, she says, he waits for you. The last sentence, in the darkness, two shadows reaching through the hopeless, heavy dusk. Their hands meet and light spills in a flood like 100 golden urns pouring out of the sun. Ah! Literally, the most tragic story. He spends so much time with the happiness of Patroclus and Achilles. And it's just this like terrible feeling of knowing what will happen. You know how it'll end. And you keep reading and you keep reading and you know what's going to happen. You know it's going to be terrible. But you read anyways because it's just so good and you just want to consume it. It's like perfectly nailed the tragedy. There was one other book that I read called Angels Before Man, which was a queer retelling of the fall of Lucifer, and also nailed tragedy. Just the foreshadowing, the understanding of us knowing what was going to happen when the characters don't, and these little odes to that, these little things hidden in the book for us to find that the characters are unaware of, and it just hurts every time. Masterful. Amazing. Would I recommend this? Yes, if you want to get your heart broken. It won a prize for a reason. Little tears. I just think that this is, in my opinion, such an amazing example of a retelling. It's pulling from the original themes of the myth. It's representing the cultural context and an understanding that probably is similar or may have been similar to the understanding of the Greeks and their gods. And it is still it's applying that source material to the book and getting us a little nuggets, giving us nuggets that we're sitting and we're like, nugget. And I love that. It's just, I could read it again and go through and be super intense, but I devoured this book. I got like to here and then I couldn't stop. I read it in like 2 days. Madeline Miller, you absolutely amazing author. Absolutely amazing. I am incredibly excited to see, because I think she said she was doing the descent or the abduction of Persephone in Persephone's story. So I am really excited to see, especially with her themes of like how she pulls from the source material. I want to see how that goes. I'm very excited. One of the best novelistic adaptations of Homer in recent memory. I agree with that. Specializing in adapting classical tales to a modern audience. I think she really did that. She really did that. She has renewed my interest in Greek mythology, which is wild. It's wild to me. Yeah, that's my official review. I cannot believe that I read this. I cried, I died, I was reborn. If you have a book that you are interested in me reading next, another retelling, adaptation, etc., let me know. I've already got a couple suggestions that I will be looking into, and officially I will do like a little poll on my Instagram or on YouTube for kind of the official thing. But yeah, have you read this book? If you haven't, tell me why. If you have, let me know what you think. Feel free to leave a comment, subscribe, turn the bell on, but no pressure. If you remember to drink water, and have an amazing rest of your day. Siate benedetti.